February is Black History Month, and in our next segment, we explore the Black voice. It's a community that has always been strong in Brooklyn, but as the dynamics of the population change and disparities between groups widen, many are beginning to wonder if their voices are still being heard.
Brooklyn is the Black Mecca. I love Harlem, but Brooklyn is the Black Mecca. And so it's symbolic of whatever's going on in Black America. You see it right in Brooklyn. How could you say that we're doing well in Black America? You see what's going on in Brooklyn.
As the idea of political change dominates the national conversation, community activist Kevin Powell held a forum to talk about whether Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream can still help create change here at home.
How could you live in Brooklyn, specifically Fort Greene, Brooklyn, and see all the businesses that have been shut down on Myrtle Avenue from Flatbush all the way out, and knowing that those businesses were shut down on purpose because it's a way of quarantining the poor folks who live in Fort Greene projects? How could you not feel that?
Joe Gonzalez grew up in those housing complexes. He says the area isn't what it used to be because the community has lost their voice.
Police are going, the hospital's going, the whole area's going to hell. This has been a wholesale stripping of a once very vibrant community that formerly lived here. When communities are not respected, such as Fort Greene projects and the surrounding area, you watch a decline of services that the city officials and various other public officials are providing in the community. You watch those services decline.
If you look back, Brooklyn's Black community has a history of political power. From marching for civil rights, championing education reform, to electing the first Black woman to Congress.
It was so strong that at one point, Black Brooklyn was actually the strongest political organization in New York City. We ran the Jesse Jackson campaign. We ran the statewide campaign. We had organization. It was, I would say, a very grand period during that time.
Esmeralda Simmons has been active in Brooklyn politics for 30 years. She says Black leadership has increased over the years, but the community still doesn't have the ear of the mayor.
It's a pretty sad day right now. The county leadership was lost when Clarence Norman was convicted. And at the same time, even though there are still some very good elected officials, because term limits came into the city council, people who had a lot of experience in the city council and seniority were tossed out.
As New York City became heavily populated by other, quote, minorities, I'm talking different shades of Latino communities, members of those Latino communities, and the Asian community, and that somewhat diluted the political power that Black people had. At the same time, certain numbers of Black people started doing very well, getting their own homes in residential areas in New York City or in the suburban communities, and then there became a very sharp divide.
Councilman Charles Barron is trying to change all of that. He's set to make a run to be the first Black borough president of Brooklyn and promises to make Black residents a priority. He even led the fight to rename Gates Avenue in Bedford-Stuyvesant after former Black activist Sonny Carson, who allegedly called himself anti-white.
It's beyond the street naming now. All right. It's about the self-respect and dignity of a community.
The proposal was defeated in City Hall, leading some Brooklynites to think local leaders don't care about the Black community. But it wasn't all bad news. Black Brooklyn made some important wins recently, including saving a house on Duffield Street, thought to have been part of the Underground Railroad, from being torn down, and electing Diana Johnson, the first Black judge, to the surrogate court. The celebration didn't last long. Johnson recently appeared to be the victim of a hate crime when racial slurs were found on elevator doors close to her office.
That's the equivalent of a noose in the courthouse, to have that kind of writing, put up on the wall. And she's newly elected. To have that happen, such disrespect happen, means that there's a lot of resentment about us flexing our muscle.
But activists haven't given up on the idea that elections can be a powerful rallying force.
What people fail to realize is that local elections are more important for their lives day to day. Local elected officials make decisions about transportation, about economic development, about where tax dollars are spent. And this is really a great opportunity for community residents to get their voices heard.
Some community residents like Joe Gonzalez are shifting their focus away from the political machine and onto empowering people in the community.
Politicians here all the time, including local elected officials, who won't even open up their mouth to complain that there's a mountain of garbage right behind me that's been there 2 or 3 days. You're a senator, you're a city council person, you should open up your mouth and ask the question, why are mountains of garbage allowed to exist in Fort Greene projects?
Powell, who's running for the 10th District congressional seat, feels that there needs to be more of a synergy between effective black leaders and an active black community.
If you look at the history of black folks, we can't wait for the government to, answer our issues. We got to solve it for ourselves. We got to shift our mindset about it's not about, those folks. It's about, was Dr. King elected official? Nah. Was Malcolm X elected official? Nah. Faneuil Hamer? Nah. They were regular folks who said we can change the paradigm here. And so let's get out of the mindset that a leader is only a minister or an elected official or someone who has a title. That's not a leader to me. That's just someone with a title unless they're doing real work.